They looked like the perfect couple, a billionaire oil mogul and his teenage bride, wrapped in a whirlwind romance of wealth and power. Their extravagant wedding made headlines, their honeymoon was the envy of millions, and their love story seemed destined for eternity. But just days after saying I do, she was dead. No witnesses. No clear motive. Just a blood-stained hotel suite and a husband with a chillingly calm alibi. For years, the truth remained buried, hidden behind wealth, corruption, and carefully crafted lies. The world moved on, convinced it was a tragic accident, a mystery never to be solved. But secrets don't stay buried forever. And when one determined investigator came too close to the truth, the perfect facade began to crack. How does a love story turn into a brutal tragedy? How does devotion warp into control, and adoration gives way to fear? What happens when money, power, and silence shield a monster from justice? For years, the truth lay buried, whispered about but never spoken aloud. Until one woman dared to expose the darkness he fought so hard to keep hidden. Before we dive into this shocking case, take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more chilling tales of love, lies, and betrayal. Because some love stories don't end with happily ever after, they end with murder. Jahari Ellis had always dreamed of a life bigger than the one she was born into. Growing up in the rougher parts of Houston with her single mother, Tamika, every day was a fight to survive. The bills were never paid on time, eviction notices came like clockwork, and dinner often depended on whatever was left in the fridge. Jahari worked long shifts at a rundown diner, serving customers who barely looked at her, all while trying to keep up with college classes she could hardly afford. She and her mother were barely surviving, trapped in a cycle that felt impossible to escape. Then came Zamarian Devon. He was the kind of man people whispered about. A 72-year-old oil mogul, ruthless in business, feared by rivals, and worshipped by those who depended on his wealth. He had power, influence, and a reputation for getting whatever he wanted, including women. When Zamarian first walked into the diner, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than a year's worth of rent, Jahari thought he was just another rich old man looking for attention. But he didn't just want attention. He wanted her. The pursuit was relentless. First, it was cash tips larger than her entire paycheck. Then it was extravagant gifts, a designer bag, a pair of diamond earrings, a brand new car parked outside her crumbling apartment. Jahari hesitated at first, but with her mother's health declining and debt piling up, saying no started to feel impossible. He promised her a life free of struggle, a future where she'd never have to work another shift or worry about money again. And just like that, Jahari found herself slipping into a world she had only ever seen on TV. Their relationship became an internet sensation. People called her lucky, a modern-day Cinderella who had won the ultimate prize. Pictures of their lavish dates flooded social media, private jets, luxury vacations, extravagant shopping sprees. Jahari called Zamarian her guardian angel, her blessing from above. He called her his perfect little wife. But not everyone was convinced. The whispers never stopped. Some called it love, others called it a business deal. The age gap disturbed people, but the power imbalance was even worse. The way Zamarian held her just a little too tight, the way his eyes darkened whenever she spoke to another man, it didn't go unnoticed. But to the world, she was glowing, living every girl's fantasy. And then came the wedding. An over-the-top spectacle held at Zamarian's Texas mansion, where politicians, celebrities, and business tycoons gathered to celebrate the billionaire and his teenage bride. It was a night straight out of a fairy tale. But fairy tales always have a dark side. And Jahari had no idea that hers was about to become a nightmare. The world saw a fairy tale, but behind closed doors, Jahari was living a nightmare. Zamarian was charming, generous, and protective, or at least, that's what she had told herself in the beginning. But now, as his wife, she understood what that really meant. Protection wasn't about keeping her safe, it was about keeping her under his control. The moment she said, "I do," everything changed. It started small. He didn't like the way she dressed, too revealing. He had a closet full of designer clothes waiting for her, all hand-picked by him. He didn't approve of her friends, too much influence. One by one, they stopped calling, either blocked by Zamarian or warned to stay away. He watched her social media closely, scanning every post, every comment. If she posted a picture he didn't like, she deleted it before she could ask why. If a man so much as complimented her online, Zamarian would grab her phone and remind her, in a low, steady voice, that she belonged to him. The punishments were quiet. A hand gripping her wrist too hard. A cold, distant silence that lasted for hours. An apology that came with a diamond bracelet, an expensive trip, a new car. He never had to say it out loud, his gifts weren't love, they were payment for her silence. She told herself she could handle it. Jahari had confided in her mother once, just once. One night, when Zamarian had been particularly cruel, she locked herself in the bathroom and called Tamika. Her mother had always been strong, had always taught her to fight back. But what was Jahari supposed to do now? Fight against a man with enough money and power to make people disappear? "He's different when we're alone," she whispered. "Baby, come home." "I can't." There was no home to go back to. Zamarian had taken care of that, too. Tamika lived in the house he bought, drove the car he paid for, went to doctors he funded. If Jahari left, she wouldn't just be leaving behind wealth, she'd be leaving behind security, safety for her mother, a life without struggle. So she stayed. And then came the honeymoon. A private villa in the Maldives, miles away from civilization, surrounded by crystal-clear waters and endless skies. It was paradise. Or at least, it was supposed to be. Jahari told herself that maybe, away from everything, they could find their way back to how things were in the beginning. She convinced herself that the distance from the world would mean distance from the anger in his eyes, the tension in his grip. But deep down, she knew better. Because a man like Zamarian didn't need an audience to be cruel. And now, with no one watching, she was more trapped than ever. The fifth night was when everything broke. Jahari had spent the day in silence, her mind racing. The paradise of the Maldives felt like a prison, the ocean stretching endlessly around them like walls she could never climb. She had tried to play the role of the perfect wife, smiling for pictures, clinking champagne glasses, letting Zamarian show her off to the resort staff like a prized possession. But inside, she was unraveling. She couldn't do this anymore. That night, as Zamarian poured himself a drink in their private villa, she finally spoke the words that had been burning inside her. "I want to go home." The glass in his hand froze midair. Slowly, he turned to face her, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "Home." He chuckled, swirling the amber liquid before taking a slow sip. "Baby, you are home." "No, my home. My real life. I can't do this anymore." His smirk vanished. "You think you can just walk away from me?" His voice was calm, eerily so. Jahari's stomach twisted, but she stood her ground. "I'm not happy, Zamarian. I feel trapped." He set his drink down, stepping toward her with that measured, deliberate pace she had learned to fear. "Trapped?" He let out a low laugh, shaking his head. "Let me remind you of something, Jahari. I took you out of the gutter. You and your mother were barely surviving, and now look at you. Wearing diamonds, flying private, living in luxury, and you're trapped." She swallowed hard, her pulse hammering. "Money doesn't mean anything if I'm miserable." His hand moved fast, gripping her wrist so hard she gasped. "You don't get to be miserable," he whispered, his breath hot against her face. "You don't get to leave me." Jahari yanked her arm back, stumbling away from him. "You're a monster," she spat. "I hate you." That was it. The moment he snapped. His hand swung before she even saw it coming, an open palm crack across her face that sent her reeling backward. The sting burned, but it was the cold, empty look in his eyes that made her blood run cold. She turned and bolted for the bathroom. Zemarian moved fast, faster than a man his age should. She barely made it past the doorway before he grabbed her from behind, his grip steel around her arm as he yanked her backward. The sudden force sent her stumbling, her head slamming against the edge of the bathtub. Stars burst in her vision. She tried to crawl away, but he was on her, his hands wrapping around her throat. "You're mine," he hissed. "You hear me? Mine." Jahari clawed at his hands, her nails raking his skin, but he didn't flinch. The pressure tightened. The world blurred. Then, suddenly, his grip loosened. She gasped for air, coughing, blinking through her daze, just as she felt his hands on her shoulders. Before she could react, he shoved her backward. Into the bathtub. Her body hit the cold porcelain as the faucet knob turned. Water gushed over her face, icy and unforgiving. She screamed, kicking, thrashing, but Zemarian was stronger. He pressed her down, his hands on her shoulders, his weight unmovable. The water rose quickly. Jahari coughed, choked, fought. Her nails scraped at his arms, but he didn't let go. Tears burned her eyes as she bucked and struggled, her lungs screaming for air. "Please." Her mind screamed, but no words came out. The world started to fade. Her movements slowed. Her fingers twitched, then went still. The last thing she saw was Zemarian's face, calm, almost peaceful. And then, there was nothing. Silence. Zemarian exhaled, smoothing his robe as he stepped back, staring at the stillness before him. The water was pink, swirling lazily down the drain. He ran a hand through his hair, let out a slow breath, and turned away. As if nothing had happened. Zemarian's voice was thick with panic when he called the hotel staff. "My wife, she slipped in the tub. She's not breathing." By the time security and medical personnel rushed into the villa, he was kneeling beside the bathtub, gripping Jahari's lifeless body with shaking hands. His robe was damp, his face streaked with artificial grief. The doctor checked for a pulse, then shook his head. Jahari was pronounced dead on the spot. Zemarian collapsed against the tub, his performance flawless. "No, no, no. Please, do something." The Maldivian authorities arrived shortly after. A local officer, barely in his 30s, took one look at the scene and turned to the resort manager, already wary of the powerful man standing before him. "It looks like she hit her head," Zemarian offered, his voice hoarse. "We had a couple of drinks. She wanted to soak in the tub before bed. I heard a thud, and when I walked in," he broke off, covering his face as if overcome with emotion. "She was under the water. I tried to save her." The officer hesitated. A few photographs were taken, a few questions asked, but no one pressed too hard. This was a billionaire, a man whose wealth could build or destroy reputations. In the end, the official report was short and clinical: accidental drowning. Possible head injury. There was no autopsy. No deeper investigation. Jahari's body was flown back to Houston, sealed in a coffin before her mother could see her one last time. Tamika Ellis sobbed through the funeral, her body racked with grief. But deep inside, an unease took root. Jahari had always been cautious. She was terrified of Zemarian. She had told Tamika she wanted to leave. So how could she have just slipped? The more she asked, the fewer answers she received. Calls to the Maldivian authorities were ignored. Lawyers turned her away. Every time she tried to push for an independent investigation, roadblocks appeared out of nowhere. And then there were the men in suits, Zemarian's lawyers, who showed up at her doorstep with a settlement check large enough to change her life. "A tragedy," one of them said with a rehearsed sigh. Mr. Devon wants to make sure Johari's family is taken care of. Tamika threw the check in their faces. She knew the truth. But knowing the truth wasn't enough. Money moved mountains, and Zamarian had plenty of it. For the next 3 years, life continued for him as if nothing had happened. He returned to Houston a widower, wrapped in the sympathetic arms of society. Business moguls, politicians, even celebrities sent their condolences. His name was whispered in admiration at galas, his investments flourished, and soon, he was back to doing what he did best, living. There were other women. Younger, more beautiful, carefully selected. None of them lasted long. And every time someone dared to ask about Johari, the response was always the same, a sad shake of the head, a deep sigh. It was a tragic accident. And for 3 years, that was the end of it. Until one woman decided it wasn't. Nairai Payton knew exactly what kind of man Zamarian Devon was before she ever met him. She had studied every article, every interview, every carefully staged photo of him and Johari. She had watched the clips of their wedding, memorized the sound of his voice, and dissected the lies he told the world about his beloved young wife's tragic accident. And she had made it her mission to destroy him. At 21, Nairai was everything Zamarian looked for, young, beautiful, ambitious, and seemingly naive. She played the part flawlessly. She let him believe she was another girl enchanted by his wealth, another desperate social climber who would do anything for a taste of his world. He fell for it. She met him at a high-profile charity event, where she caught his attention with a careful mix of charm and feigned innocence. Within weeks, he was wining and dining her, sending extravagant gifts, testing her obedience. And Nairai, knowing exactly what he wanted, gave him just enough to keep him interested. But behind her soft smiles and wide eyes, she was working. Late at night, while Zamarian slept, she scoured his office. She found burner phones, hidden safes, encrypted files. She recorded their conversations, capturing the way he spoke about Johari in past tense, as if she had been nothing more than a possession he had outgrown. "You remind me of her," he once murmured, fingers tracing the outline of Nairai's face. She was beautiful too. But beauty means nothing if you don't know how to behave. The way he said it sent a chill through her. Still, she needed more. Something undeniable. Something that would finally bring him down. Then one night, the opportunity came. Zamarian had been drinking, reminiscing about his past conquests, slipping into the arrogance that came with knowing he was untouchable. He left his phone on the marble counter, unlocked. Nairai, heart pounding, seized her moment. She scrolled through messages, bank transfers, deleted files, until she found it. An audio recording. Dated the night of Johari's death. With trembling fingers, she pressed play. First, the sound of voices, muffled at first, then clearer. Johari's voice, desperate. "I can't do this anymore. I want to leave." Then Zamarian, his tone sharp and menacing. "You think you can just walk away from me?" The argument escalated. Johari's voice broke into sobs. Then came the struggle, the shuffling of feet, a gasp, water splashing. And finally, his voice, chilling in its finality. "You should have obeyed me." Nairai clamped a hand over her mouth. She sent the file to Tamika within seconds. The next morning, law enforcement reopened Johari's case. And by the time Zamarian Devon realized what was happening, it was already too late. The morning of the raid was chaotic. FBI agents swarmed Zamarian's estate, armed with a warrant and a mountain of evidence. For the first time in his life, there was no one he could pay off, no politician he could call, no loophole he could exploit. He was dragged out in handcuffs, still in his silk robe, the cameras capturing every humiliating second. The media erupted. News outlets replayed the footage on a loop, dissecting every detail of his downfall. His face was plastered across every screen, no longer the charming billionaire but a murderer, a fraud, a monster exposed for all to see. Tamika watched it unfold from her small Houston apartment, gripping a framed photo of Jahari. Tears streamed down her face. 3 years. 3 years of fighting, screaming into a void, being ignored. And now, finally, the world saw the truth. The trial was even worse. Day after day, Tamika sat in the front row, staring at the man who had stolen her daughter's life. She refused to look away as the prosecution unraveled his past, ex-wives too afraid to speak out, settlements paid in secret, a history of violence buried under money and power. And then came the recording. The courtroom fell silent as Jahari's voice played through the speakers. Her desperate words, the sound of her struggle, and finally, Zamarian's cold, chilling final statement. "You should have obeyed me." A woman in the gallery sobbed. A reporter covered her mouth in horror. Even the judge's expression darkened. Zamarian sat motionless. No smug grin, no arrogance. Just silence. His lawyers fought, but the evidence was insurmountable. The jury deliberated for only 5 hours before returning with the verdict. Guilty. The words rang through the courtroom like a gunshot. Tamika let out a sharp breath, gripping the edges of the wooden bench. She hadn't realized she was shaking until Nairai placed a hand over hers. The judge wasted no time. "Zamarian Devon, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." Gasps rippled through the room. Zamarian barely reacted. He only turned slightly, his gaze locking onto Nairai. She met his eyes, reached for the diamond necklace he had gifted her, and ripped it off. Without a word, she let it fall to the floor. The tiny clink echoed in the silence. Then she whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. "Burn in hell." The bailiffs moved in, grabbing his arms. For the first time in his life, Zamarian Devon had no control. He was just another criminal being led away in chains. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, protesters, reporters, former fans who once worshipped his wealth but now spit on his name. Some chanted for justice. Others held signs with Jahari's face, reminding the world who the real victim was. Tamika stepped outside, the cool air hitting her tear-streaked face. Reporters shoved microphones toward her, asking how she felt. She didn't speak. Instead, she lifted Jahari's framed photo high in the air, letting the world see her daughter one last time. The crowd erupted in cheers. And for the first time in 3 years, Tamika finally exhaled. This case is a haunting reminder that beneath the glitz and glamour, the darkest truths can hide in plain sight. Jahari's story is not just about love gone wrong, it's about control, manipulation, and the terrifying power of wealth to silence victims. For 3 years, Zamarian Devon walked free, shielded by his influence, his money stretching further than the cries for justice. But in the end, no amount of power could bury the truth forever. Jahari's life was stolen, but her story will not be forgotten. It serves as a warning, a lesson, and a call to action. How many other young women have fallen into the hands of men like Zamarian? How many have been silenced, their stories brushed aside because their abuser had the right connections? What role did wealth and power play in delaying justice? And more importantly, how can we ensure that young women are protected from men like him? If this case shocked you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more cases that uncover the darkest truths behind love, lies, and betrayal.